Cubs with a couple of tough losses in a row, actually 3 tough losses in a row. We may make that 4 tough losses in a row. And a lot going on, and we're going to talk about the Cubs and a bunch of other stuff with our friend Al Yellon. But first, if you're new, we want you to be on our roster. Make sure that you like and subscribe. Hit the thumbs up button. It's really easy to do, and it's free. You know Al from BleedCubbieBlue, kind of a trendsetter when it comes to websites and team sites, and it's a guy that I've followed for a long time. Great to have you on our channel, Al. How you been?
Good. Thanks for having me. And I hate to make things worse than they are, but the Cubs have actually lost 5 in a row now, which is matches their worst losing streak of the year, and you could not ask for a worse time to have this happen.
No, and look, it's the way that the team's played. I just feel like everyone's looking for a solution, maybe the reasoning behind it. I just feel like they haven't given enough rest to their stars. Dansby Swanson's like in there every day. Cody Bellinger's in there every day. Ian Happ's in there every day. And it's not affecting the fielding as much as it is the hitting. But even if you have an off day, a lot of times you travel, so it's not really like you're relaxing and you're catching up on your rest. And maybe I'm wrong, but that just seems to be part of it to me. I mean, are you seeing the same thing, or what do you attribute it to?
It's you can't really say that about Dansby Swanson because he basically played every game in the last 3 years. So this is a guy.
It's part of him.
And think about that play in the 13th inning on Saturday night. The ball that bounced off of Hayden Wisniewski. If Swanson takes a few steps forward and catches that ball, game's over, Cubs win.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that changes everything for Sunday also. It's hard to think that one play can have that much of an impact, but that directly led to losing the game on Saturday. Probably didn't make things any better Sunday. And the other thing is, who are you going to play in place of these guys? The Cubs don't have a lot of great bench players.
Mm-hmm.
That's been a weakness for this team, unfortunately. Maybe these guys are a bit tired. They are coming home for a week. They're playing teams that are not good teams that are not good on the road. So, this is the time to do it. They've got 6 games against the Pirates and Rockies, and they pretty much have to win at least 5, which is a tough thing to say, but they really do have to go at least 5-1.
Yeah. Tough thing about baseball is that when you start counting wins, you get into the trouble that they got in on this road trip. We just kept saying, hey, if they just win this, and then they lose. And it's like, it's so tough to focus on just the game that you have in front of you, because all of a sudden things like Saturday happen. You could have won that game, should have won that game, didn't, right? And this is just a tough time. And I agree with you about the bench players, but we don't really know what Alexander Canario can do. I mean, maybe he could have given Happ a day off, right? I mean, he was tearing it up in Iowa. But, I mean, I understand. I'm sure where David Ross is, he's thinking, I don't want to lose with minor league guys, right?
Right.
But then I look at teams like Baltimore, and it's like they lose a guy, and they just throw the next minor leaguer in.
So maybe the answer is they've got better minor league players. I mean, the Cubs do have good prospects, but Pete Kerr Armstrong came up to the Cubs, made some great defensive plays, but he hasn't hit. So I can understand why David Ross didn't want to put him in the lineup against the Diamondbacks.
Yeah,
so, you can't necessarily make those comparisons to other teams. Sometimes you gotta go with the guys you got. It's I hear people calling for David Ross to be fired, and I can't think of anything more ridiculous. This is not his fault. David Ross has those guys playing hard every single day. They obviously respect him. And sure, you can complain about Ross's bullpen selections or lineup selections from time to time. But you know what? If Ross were replaced within a week, you'd be complaining about the new guys' selections. That's just what being a manager is about. So I think Ross is doing a good job. He's under contract for next year. They have an option for 25. Front office loves him. He's not going anywhere.
Al, you bring up a great point because it's so polarizing. I mean, I'm sure on your site, you see the same thing as I'm seeing on this channel, where people get in the comment section and it feels like there's a really loud vocal, whatever percent that can't stand David Ross. And I'm like, hey, well, I was with you, I'm like, hey, maybe I don't see it, I think that the team plays really hard. I didn't feel like that at the end of Joe Madden's tenure. I thought they needed somebody like Rossi, but I'm just shocked at how polarizing this guy's become. And I guess that's just the nature of this job.
Right. And remember that before this week, people and some of the same people were talking about David Ross as a potential manager of the year candidate.
Yeah.
So, and if the Cubs make the playoffs, he might very well be manager of the year. So I think this is kind of like, what have you done for me lately? And it's, obviously things have not been good lately.
What do you see at BleedCubbieBlue? I mean, if you had to put a percentage up and you have one of the best, message boards in Cubs baseball. I mean, like I know I've looked at it so many times and I love reading it. And I know a lot of people that are watching probably do too. You said, okay, off the top of my head, I'm going to poll. What do you think the percentage is on people that are with them and people that are against them?
Well, I don't have to guess because, in fact, I have a poll up this morning.
Look at that.
Yesterday, should David Ross be fired? And as of the last time I looked a little while ago, it was 75% no that he should not be fired. So, that seems about the thing. There's a vocal minority of 25% who say, yeah, get rid of the guy. But most people understand that this is not on him.
Well, I'm glad I asked that question. Perfect timing on that, because I was curious. It's allowed 25% is what you're saying. Yep. I feel like the team's playing hard. I think that this is a learning experience for him because I do think that they're tired. But I think part of the reason they're tired is because they do give a lot of effort. I mean, this is a team that has surprised a lot of people, including myself. I didn't see this coming. The way that things were going at the beginning of the season, I've been shocked by it. Obviously, pleasantly surprised. I've enjoyed this run, and I'm sure you have too.
Just remember that this is David Ross's fourth year managing Cubs. This is the first normal baseball season he's had. First, there was the pandemic season. Mm-hmm. Then there was 2021, which was also kind of affected by COVID. Then 2022, there was a lockout. So this is the first time he's had to really be a manager in kind of a normal way. Team started out well, then they had a rough patch, largely due to injuries, and then they played well for more than 3 months. And I think that more than 3 months play, that's who this team really is. They've had a rough patch. Every team has a rough patch. The Blue Jays just got swept out of a series, and I can't remember by who, but it was by a team they shouldn't have been swept by.
Right.
We're out of a playoff position. Then they went ahead and swept over the weekend. They swept the Rangers, a good team. So, this happens to everybody. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened to the Brewers or the Phillies or the Diamondbacks. But, look what happened to the Giants. The Giants were in contention for a playoff spot. They almost got swept in a 4-game series by the Rockies, who played well against the Cubs. So, it's like, any baseball team can beat any other baseball team. Even the A's and Royals, who have lost 100 games, have swept teams this year. So it's a kind of a cyclical thing. If this was the last week of the season, I'd be a little more worried, but there's 12 games left, still enough time.
What do you think it's going to take for the Cubs to make the playoffs at this point?
Winning games.
Yeah.
Like I said, they got to win at least 5 at home, and then they've got a tough road trip to Atlanta and Milwaukee. So, they played well against the Braves when the Braves were at Wrigley last month. The Braves have already clinched the division, and they're close to clinching the best record throughout the National League playoffs. So, maybe they'll ease up a little bit. The Brewers may very well have clinched the division by the time the Cubs get there at the end of the season. So, and the Cubs have played Milwaukee well. They're 5-5 against them. Right. It looked like that series would be important for the tiebreaker. Maybe it's not that important anymore. Speaking of the tiebreakers, that's another thing that is a little bit concerning because the Cubs basically don't have the tiebreaker for the wild card over any of the teams they're competing with, except the Giants, and the Giants are kind of the last one of that group. Phillies, Diamondbacks, Marlins, Reds all have the tiebreaker over the Cubs. So the Cubs are going to have to basically have a better record than at least 2 of those teams to get in.
Yeah, that's kind of a good point to make because it could come down to a tiebreaker. I'll throw up the standings and in the wild card race, and I think that's why these losses to the Diamondbacks are so significant because now all of a sudden the Cubs have drifted back into that that log jam for the final spot again, and it looked like that they were able to pull away, and they've been in that second spot for a long time. So yeah, look, I mean, not the time to go 2-8 in your last 10 games. Yeah. So I mean, like when you stare at this right here, I don't know. I mean, to me, I just think the Cubs are the better team of these guys, though.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the Diamondbacks are a good team, but I just don't think they're that good. The Marlins have played very well over the last two games. I don't think they're that good either. The Phillies, they were in the World Series last year. And
Yeah.
I should point out that the Phillies, right around this time last year, had a streak like the Cubs are having now. They lost 13 of their last 20. They came into Wrigley the last week of last year and the Cubs swept them. So they kind of backed into the playoffs. Well, and then they got hot and they went all the way to the World Series. So the important thing is here, just get in. Because once you get into October baseball, anything can happen. As we've seen, the Phillies got to the World Series as a wild card team. The Braves won the World Series in 2021 as a wild card team.
Right.
The Nationals won the World Series in 2019 as a wild card team. So just get in. That's the real key. Win these games now and get in. And even if they have to sort of back in, like the Phillies did last year, anything can happen.
Yeah, no doubt about it. What do you think the Cubs pitching is going to look like if they get into the playoffs? And how do you feel about what they have starting?
Well, I mean, the question remains whether Marcus Stroman would return to a playoff rotation.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly looked pretty good in relief the couple times they've used him so far. Hard to say if they can extend him enough to be a starting pitcher. At this point, I think you have to count on Justin Steele, Javier Assad, and Kyle Hendricks as your top three starters.
Yeah.
Postseason, and maybe Jordan Wicks comes after that. Yeah.
No, I agree. I was worried about Wicks, and he said it was the first three games just went perfect, and then yesterday it kind of looked like I thought it might look like, like where he's good, but he's not dominating the opponent. Maybe he's a young guy with good stuff. But yeah, I mean, having Marcus Stroman back, I almost thought that maybe he'd be the closer or be like late relief, but I think that the Cubs really could use him in the starting rotation if that's possible.
Yeah, it's possible. It's certainly possible. Anything's possible. In the playoffs, you can almost throw out the regular season records. We haven't had a team with the best record in the regular season except for 2020, which it's kind of discounting. But in a full season, the team with the best record hasn't won the World Series since 2018 when the Red Sox did it.
Yeah,
so,
wow.
I think people have to look at the playoffs. It's a totally different animal than the regular season. It's a tournament. The 12 teams that get picked to get in are playing in a tournament, and it's conceivable that having those buys that it looks like the Braves and Dodgers will have, they'll be off for a week while the wild card series are going on. Does that hurt them? Sitting around for that long? Maybe it does.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, it's a good question. I mean, you got to get there first. And it's going to be a playoff game every single day. I mean, really, it has been since the trade deadline, right? I mean, they've stood up to the challenge of having to win game after game after game up until this road trip. And I felt like the pitching the bullpen just didn't take care of business against Colorado. And I don't know why, but Arizona has just had their number this year. But I don't know. Seems like Arizona always has the Cubs number.
Every game for the last couple of weeks has felt like a playoff game. And not having Adbert Alzolay ready and healthy has also been a problem. Now Michael Fulmer is out, and those are two guys who they've counted on. And when Fulmer's been on, he's been very good. Alzolay was very good as a closer. Did these guys get injured from overuse? It's really hard to say. I mean, at a certain point, you got to use the guys you have. You can't let them sit. David Ross tried to, massage that as best he could with Alzolay. Mm-hmm. Then he had a couple weeks on the injury list. He will be back for the last road trip. He's eligible to come back for those, so they won't have him against the Pirates and Rockies. Maybe they don't need him against the Pirates and Rockies. What would be really nice is to see the Cubs come out tomorrow, Tuesday, for their first game against the Pirates and score like 6 runs in the first inning.
Yeah.
Let them breathe a little bit, because these games have all been so close, and there's been no margin for error.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was kind of hoping that happened one of the last 2 days, just have like an explosive inning instead of it being in the 9th of a game you're down 6. It'd be nice to have it in the first and then, or the 2nd or the 3rd and kind of cruise in to a win. Let's talk about Justin Steele. His chances of winning the Cy Young definitely took a hit with the 6 runs that he gave up against Arizona. Although I didn't think he pitched poorly. He just made a couple of bad pitches.
That's how I saw it. He had 2 bad pitches at the worst possible time, 2 3-run homers. Otherwise, he threw pretty well. It looks like maybe Blake Snell will be the favorite to win the Cy Young Award. Steele's got 3 starts left, and, he needs those 3 to be good, not just for the Cy Young Award, but for the Cubs to win. That's more important right now than winning an award. Let's win these games.
Yeah, and I've seen that on the on the channel too. People are like, who cares about the Cy Young if we don't win, right? Who cares about what's going to happen at the end of the season? All right, let me ask you about Cody Bellinger. What do you think long term it looks like as far as maybe him sticking with the Cubs?
Well, it's interesting because one of the reasons the Cubs have suffered over the last few games is that Cody's kind of stopped hitting. He's been in a cold stretch. Hopefully he picks that up over the next 2 weeks. I would like to see the Cubs keep him. It's clear that, he's a guy that this team needs. You can see the kind of winning attitude he brings to this team. There's things about the way he goes about his business, both on and off the field, that this team has not had a guy like that. And, people forget he's a year younger than Ian Happ, who's the Cubs just signed to a 3-year extension. So, certainly Bellinger appears to be a guy who should be, playing at this kind of level for the next 5 to 7 years. If I were Jed Hoyer, I would just tell Scott Boras that, they should go out and look around, and they'll match any offer that he gets.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I'd love to see him stay. I mean, I'm a believer like you. Well, it's just, the guy just does it all, whether it's running the bases, whether it's playing great defense at first or in the outfield, the leadership, and obviously what he can do at the plate. And he's healthy, and he's a gamer. I mean, he plays, he wants to play every day. And you can tell that this team follows his attitude. So it would really suck not to have him. I mean, to be honest with you.
Right. And, it should be noted that he, remember he missed a month with a knee injury that he suffered in Houston. And that's been, really important. Those games where they had to, of course, Mike Tauchman got his chance to play when Bellinger was out and became a useful player, but the Cubs did not do well while Bellinger was not in the lineup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. No, he's a difference maker. Al, let me ask you about you. Tell me what it was like to start BleedCubbieBlue and to be part of that when you guys got it going. Media really wasn't here yet. And what I mean by here is it used to be at a radio station or at a television station or at a newspaper. And then you guys came along, and I remember people not really, some people not really getting it. And you were so far ahead of the trend. How did you start this, and what gave you the idea, and what's that experience been like?
I started a personal blog. This goes back now 20 years to 2003. And I just did that because a lot of people I knew were doing it. I thought, well, I'll try and do this. And quickly that became about 95% Cubs. And then got noticed by the people who were starting SB Nation because Marcos Melitas, who's one of the founders of SB Nation, is a huge Cubs fan. He was reading my stuff, just kind of flattering. But they asked me to join the network, and I did. I remember being told by Tyler Baczynski, who's the other founder, so at the very least, you'll have a better platform to write on, because I know I was using some kind of WordPress thing. It quickly became a popular thing, and eventually it led to me leaving, taking a buyout for my TV job, and doing this. This is now my work. So it's been very rewarding.
Yeah, a lot of fun too. And I'm sure that you've noticed a lot more respect in what you do than when you started, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be the haters out there. I'm sure you're familiar with that, but
yeah.
I've got a lot of support and a lot of respect, and have actually, made some lifelong friends from this, which is also kind of a rewarding thing.
Yeah. Well, I met with, not with fans, but I met with like the media relations departments of the teams and, the business itself. I just remember when this started and people just not understanding that what you're doing is how it's going to be done. And I mean, I don't know if you saw it that way, but how I saw it.
I mean, I'm kind of, it started as just kind of blogging on me, sending out my thoughts, my own personal thoughts. And then, now I have a staff of 5 people who are writing for me. So I feel like I need to treat this as a more professional endeavor, and working as an editor as well as a writer. And it's not just throwing up thoughts every day. It's trying to organize an entire website to, cover the Cubs in their entirety. I don't know as much about the minor league system as other people. So I have somebody doing that who knows more than I do. And, we try to present, everything possible about the Cubs. I try to give people things they would not get everywhere else. Some of the other sites I see are what you might call aggregators. They're just kind of reposting things that you would find in other places and just giving a few thoughts and analysis about that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I try and stay away with just reposting every news item or reposting every rumor. I'd much prefer to create original content.
Yeah, and that's the name of the game. You can be ahead of it. How did you become a Cubs fan? Who were the players and the teams that turned you into a guy that loves Cubs baseball?
Well, this was the great teams of the 1960s who never won anything. The Billy Williams, Ron Santo, Ernie Banks, Fergie Jenkins group. Those are my childhood heroes. And, that was at a time when the Cubs were a big deal, big thing. Everybody thought they were finally going to win another World Series after, decades of not having even been in one. Of course, it took another almost 50 years past that to get back and win the World Series. But, being able to root for those players and be at Wrigley Field, that was, any kid would fall in love with that, I think, if they love baseball.
Right. And I'm sure you watched a lot of the games on television too, right? Jack Brickhouse, Harry Carey, those guys.
Right. I mean, that's another thing, the fact that, back in the day, most teams did not televise every game like the Cubs did because, back then it was still thought that, this is going to hurt my attendance. But what the Cubs realized, and, P.K. Wrigley was not a great team owner in terms of putting a better team on the field. But what he did understand was that television was a good marketing tool. And putting all the games, at first all the home games, and then eventually almost all the games, period, was, they would create fans. People would watch these games at home and say, I want to go see that. Also, the fact that all of the Cubs home games were during the day meant you could come home from school and see, the end of a game, whereas most teams playing at night, you couldn't do that. Even into the 1970s and 1980s, the Dodgers were only televising about a dozen games a year. So the Cubs were way ahead of the curve in televising games. And that's, I think, what really created a lot of Cubs fans when I was a kid. And then in the next generation, when they were one of the few teams putting all their games on national cable, well, that then created a national fan base of kids who were not in Chicago, who could come home from school and watch the team on TV. I've got readers who have never lived in Chicago who are Cubs fans.
Oh, yeah.
And, that's something that most other teams do not have.
Yeah. Well, look, and I think that's something that I don't know if Chicago Cub fans understand that everywhere you go, there's Cubs fans that have never even been to the stadium before, never even been to the city. The tough part about Arizona is that the Cubs took over the stadium for 3 straight days. Like get a hit, way, and then, it's got to be so frustrating for those other teams, but it's because of the television.
Right, and that's the teams like the Diamondbacks and the Rockies. They don't like Cubs fans taking over their stadium. Well, your fans should buy more tickets then.
Yeah,
Cubs fans are buying these tickets to see their team, And that happens not only in there, but it happens in Cincinnati and Milwaukee. I'm sure that even with the Brewers being a good team, that Cubs fans will be there in big numbers for that last weekend series.
Oh, I love it. I love it when the Cubs play in Milwaukee, just because it's just like you said, like it's at worst 50-50, right? I mean, it's like crazy how many Cubs fans go.
Yeah, it depends on the series and the time, but it may be close to 50-50 on that last weekend series.
Yeah, they'll be ready to go. Al, how can people find you? How can they check out your work?
Well, BleedCubbieBlue.com is the website. @BleedCubbieBlue is the Twitter account or whatever that site's being called now. And we have a page on Facebook as well. So all social media, but BleedCubbieBlue.com is the place to go.
All right, thanks. Al Yellon, Mick Gillespie, thanks for being here at the Cubs Baseball Channel, guys. And if you're not a subscriber, do it right now. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe, be part of the channel, and we'll talk to you really soon.